Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, coming to you from Satan's Den in Brooklyn, New York. But I am not alone. There is at least one little boogin who is here to talk a classic Empire feature with me. Who is here?
Well, it's me, Steve Toadboy Guntley. Very excited to be talking about these movies today, because this is a podcast about satanic sacrifices, toilet monsters, and windshield wiper sunglasses, which is to say this is a podcast about Ghoulies, and we're actually giving you a double dose today. We're giving you Ghoulies, and we're giving you Ghoulies 2. It's a fascinating couple of movies that we're going to be talking about here. A lot to get into, and luckily we brought along a special guest who can help us sort through all these little toilet monsters.
That's right, Steve. You mentioned we have a special guest today, and this is a very special guest, if I must say so myself. This is an amazing filmmaker, creator, and host of the Spill Your Guts podcast, which is a terrific horror and horror-adjacent podcast with a bunch of really amazing in-depth interviews. I'm talking, of course, about Mr. Kevin Lane. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
No.
It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
We're very excited to have you. Yeah,
we're really excited because we know, Kevin, that you are somebody with a big affinity for Full Moon, for Empire, for horror in general, and it's just we love bringing people like this onto the show who can gush and give all of these opinions, but also offer a lot of behind the scenes factoids and a lot of expertise in this area. And we love bringing in people who are experts who don't even maybe sometimes need to prepare for the show. Like you probably could have come into this thing blind.
Probably. Yes. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm in a fairly constant state of Full Moon Empire immersion in that it's merch and shit is all around me at all times.
Yeah.
I can swear on this, right?
Please. Fuck
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's like fucking encouraged.
It's like if I can't swear, I'm out. I should have opened with that.
There's no toilet humor in this episode.
Imagine doing
Ghoulies,
any kind of Full Moon or Empire podcast that was like censored without swearing. It was very weird.
Well, it's what's funny that you say that, Kevin, because I happened to look back at our show's like main page on Apple Podcasts, and there is the explicit sign next to it. And the thought crossed my mind where I said, for the run of our show so far, we've been very PG-13. Like occasionally some swearing has made its way in, but it's really like we haven't really earned that explicit rating. But you know what? Today, let's earn that explicit rating.
Yeah, let's go for it.
But before we get started,
like on our show, we have lots of different, I don't know how much of the show you guys have had a chance to check out, but it's mostly directors and actors.
Yeah.
We have a bit of other stuff. We've had, photographers and some composers and stuff like that on, but it's mostly directors and actors. And it's funny to me, some of the people that have come on the show and been very like clean in the way they spoke in contrast to the kinds of films or characters they portrayed or have made. And then some of the people that have come on that were like foul-mouthed, and I didn't necessarily anticipate it. And then some of the people that were exactly what I expected. Like Richard Elfman was on, and he makes gonzo movies, and he's a wacky guy. And and so when he had like some terrific stories that were laced with like well done profanity too. Richard's what I call a good swearer. Like some people are really good at swearing. Some people are not, but it's
and you're right, a surprising number of people, like either horror fans or horror creators, are like sweet and shy and like very retiring for the content that they put out, which I always love. That's just I love that dynamic. It's just like
it's funny,
we're exercising demons another way.
Yeah, well, and people who, I've worked in the film business for like 20 years now, and people outside of the entertainment industry that aren't horror fans will say things to me like, "Oh, it must be so serious on sets, and is it depressing, and is it kind of, is everybody really intense?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, on horror movies, everybody's, because it's all, when you get a bunch of dudes and gals or whatever." But I'm thinking of like the old boys club type guys that were making horror movies. You give them a bunch of fake blood and and there's monsters and prosthetics shit. It's like they go back to being kids again. Everybody's having fun, and it's the least intense sets I've been on. Versus
I was
going
gonna
to
say,
comedy, and everybody's fucking miserable on a comedy set.
Well, that makes sense because there's nothing worse than a failed comedy.
Yeah.
At least if you fail at a horror movie, you unintentionally make a comedy. So I think they probably approach all of the prosthetics and the effects with a level of giddiness that they can't quite bring onto a comedy set. But let's talk a little bit about who was on this set, who was making this movie. Steve, do you have some stats about the first Ghoulies movie that you can fire off for us?
Well, I sure do. We're going to go in order here. Go figure. We're going to talk about Ghoulies 1 and then Ghoulies 2. It feels natural that way. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Ghoulies was released on January 18th, 1985. It was directed by Luca Bercovici and it was written by Bercovici and Jeffrey Levy. And it was stars Peter Liapis, Lisa Pelican, Mariska Hargitay, yes, that one, Michael DeBar, Scott Thompson, Ralph Seymour, and Jack Nance. Now, this movie in particular, and I want to dig into, because I suspect this is why Kevin wanted to talk about these movies, because for something that seems very much like a footnote, this movie is crucial to our entire project here. Like, literally, we would not be sitting here having this show if it weren't for Ghoulies, because Ghoulies was the first actual unqualified hit that the Empire Films ever had. And this was Charles Band's biggest hit. This is the one that gave them the runway to start Empire, which then led into Full Moon, which then led into everything that we're talking about.
I think I'm not entirely. Was Metal Storm before this?
Yes.
Metal Storm was before this, yeah.
And that was the first proper Empire title, was it not?
It was one of the earliest ones. I think Dungeon Master might have been before that, but it was right around there, yeah.
Because I think it. Go ahead, Jerry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think after Parasite, I think when we're getting into the birth of Empire, I think it's Metal Storm, then Dungeon Master, and then Ghoulies. Mm-hmm. I think as those go. But this film, I mean, I reread this because I had this misconception in my mind before I went back and read about Charles Band's life and career. I always assumed that this movie was a theatrical bomb. I always assumed that this was a big money loser, that this was a VHS hit, which it was a VHS hit, which we'll talk about. Obviously, you can't talk about Charles Band without talking about the impact on VHS. But $35 million.
Yeah, this was one of Charlie Band's few true theatrical successes, really. I mean, and a lot of that has to do with, and we'll get into this when the timing is right, but the marketing done by some pretty bigwig marketing people that Charlie brought into the fold here.
I'm gonna say right off the top, this movie has a $30 million toilet.
Yeah,
I think that toilet, that cover art with a little puppet coming out of a toilet, made this movie more than anything that's actually in the film.
Oh, I think so. And I think it's why I think on some levels it's what people remember about it most.
Can I take this opportunity to talk a little bit about this poster? Because, all right, so I'm taking a stabbing in the dark here. We are all very familiar with this poster / VHS cover art as children, were we not?
Yeah.
For me, it would have been the video store, like the box. Yeah. Before I don't think I saw the poster first. I just think I saw just sitting on the
video
shelf.
store, but same for me.
Right. I mean, I only said poster because it was a poster, but this was 100% VHS art. But the thing about this that's so fascinating to me is that Charles Band, once you know a little bit about him and his model for selling films was let's get a poster and sell this thing, and then we'll worry about getting a script later on. And you would think that this movie would be the poster child, no pun intended, for that. You would think like the first thing that would pop in my mind would be like, oh, Ghoulies. Like they must have created this poster and then said, all right, well, now we need a movie to surround our poster. The shocking thing is that this actually went the other way around, which was that this movie was almost completed and shot primarily in 3D, which I think is hilarious. But Gary Allen...
They only shot 3 days of the movie in 3D.
Oh, was it only
Yeah,
3
something like
days?
that.
He only
Okay,
did 3
so
days
it
in
wasn't as
3D,
much
and
as
then,
I thought.
Yeah, and then Charlie and Luca, the director, were like, "This is way too complicated. Fuck this. Let's just shoot this like a normal thing."
Yeah, and if you know anything about 3D in the early 80s, was that you had to get those special lenses for all of the theaters that it was opening into. So that was going to be a pretty penny. But the idea that they had what I believe to be the majority of a movie finished before the very high, as Confessions of a Puppet Master will tell you, Gary Allen came up with the idea with Charles Band of having the ghoulie coming out of the toilet, and then they worked on the slogan, the tagline of the poster together, finally landing on
Yeah, the
"They'll
original
get you in
tagline
the
was
end."
"They'll eat your ass," and Charlie thought
Eat
that
your ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I would argue might sell that movie today.
to a
I'm just
different
saying.
audience. I
Damn,
think.
damn
Yeah.
millennials.
These Gen Z, they love eating that butt, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going for that E rating today. Yeah, no, it absolutely is. Yeah, it was just like this kind of stroke of genius where they wanted to sell this movie, and they came up with this idea of this ghoulie coming out of the toilet. Problem is, there was no scene like that in this film, and I would argue that that does not really convey the tone of this film at all.
No.
But either way, they came across this fun idea, and so they very quickly got a toilet. They gathered a small crew together. They set up this rig so the puppeteer can work underneath the toilet, and then they shot a little scene and inserted it into the movie. And it's literally like a 3-second shot in the film, but they had to have
Oh,
it
and
in
it
there.
has no resonance when you see it in the movie, really, either. It's really just effective as that poster.
It's in a black void, like in the movie.
Yeah,
Like,
you can
it
tell it's
looks
shot
like the
on some
poster,
soundstage and tacked in later, for sure. I mean, it's a pickup shot, no question. It like you said, it has no context within the film. It doesn't. It's funny to me that this movie, you know, you read so many reviews and things at the time of this film, and they're constantly referencing it as a Gremlins ripoff. But what's strange about that is that the original inception of this movie predates Gremlins when it was a Stan Winston project. So
And there was also no real indication that Gremlins was going to be this huge phenomenon that
No.
it wound up being.
and
you
if
know?
anyone who knows just a fucking thing about Charlie Band knows his obsession with little creatures.
Yeah, he
predates
has a
him
little-
seeing Gremlins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's got a
So-
little tiny terror fetish, and
yeah,
he
absolutely.
basically went to John Carl Buechler after the Stan Winston project folded, and said, let's do something like this. And John Carl Buechler designed. Now, I'm going to say this, and you guys feel free to agree with me or disagree. I didn't actually see the movie Ghoulies till probably 10 years after it was released. My understanding was
So
that
what,
they
like
all...
94, 95 is when you would have seen
I'm
it?
going to say I saw it. Yeah, I was probably 14 or so. I probably saw it around 94, 95. I was under the impression at the time that all of the Ghoulies were going to look like Fish Ghoulie.
Yes.
Right.
This is one of the things I want to get into. Like, I'm very confused about what the Ghoulies deal is, because there is not one, like, it's unlike the Gremlins where there's not like one consistent Ghoulie design. Like, there's 4 different some of them are mammalian, some of them are reptilian. Like, there's no real consistency or rhyme or reason to their design.
Well, I know in the original story idea that Luca and I can't remember the other writer that he was working with.
Levy, Jeffrey Levy.
I think it was Levy. They had another project they were shopping that they had taken to Charlie and Luca. What's his last name again?
Bercovici. I might be
Bercovici.
mispronouncing that. Yeah.
Luca Bercovici.
sounds correct.
We'll assume that it sounds good enough to me.
Yeah.
Luca was in Parasite
Mm-hmm.
for Charlie as an actor, and so
Yeah.
then he came back around later and said to Charlie, "I want to do this movie," and they pitched some kind of movie that had monsters in it that were elemental, that represented all the different elements, wind, fire.
Oh,
whatever.
okay. So like a
so
fire
cons-
monster, a water monster.
Yeah, I
things
don't
like
know if
that.
they would
Got it.
look like those elements, but they in some way would be. They would implement those elements in probably their kills or something.
Electricity
think-
gremlin.
That
Yeah.
kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that they tried to kind of embed the Ghoulies with that. So you had the one that came out of the water, you had the one that flew. I think they were kind of trying. It's half baked and it's not really explained in any way. But I think that was, because whenever and Charlie Band is a master of this. Whenever you're gonna have these little critters, you've got to do something to give them each their own personality. Probably best done in the Puppet Master films, obviously.
Yeah.
And also as Charlie to learn later, the more that not just the way their aesthetic, but the personality they have, it helps when you're trying to sell little fucking toys to people. So I think Ghoulies was, on some level, it's another really important film for Charlie because it was really the beginning of him working out. How do you do little creatures, give them personality, create fan favorites? I love the cat glue. Oh, I like the fish glue. Like, all stuff that would serve a major function when he gets to something like Puppet Master or Dolls, even the Stuart Gordon film, which were all the kind of the films that really fed into Charlie's obsession with little terrors, which of course you see in like Hideous and all these, constantly Charlie toying with that formula throughout his career.
Yeah, so many of those.
Yeah, so many, and I'll have to sadly admit most of them I love. So
hey.
This is a safe
space. We wouldn't be here if we didn't feel the same way.
I'm probably the only person I know that has seen Hideous as many times as I have, or has seen it at all.
I have not seen it yet. I'm looking forward to it.
I kind of love it. Is it a good movie?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's sort of the conceit of the majority of the show.
Absolutely.
We're kind of presenting our opinions of like, is this high art? No. Did we enjoy this? Yes.
Some of the other episodes you guys had done, and like there were a few there I was like, I haven't even seen that movie. The Piranha Woman stuff.
That's a newer one. Yeah.
And I'm not Full Moon has done some great stuff in their newer crop, but I'm more of a old school Full Moon guy, which I think Charlie is too, and he's the guy who makes them.
Absolutely, and I think we're in the same boat, and we're trying to keep an open mind with some of the newer stuff. And
I saw you guys did an episode on Evil Bong, right? Did you just do
Evil
which
Bong
ones did you do?
We've
just
only done
the
the first
one.
Evil Bong so far.
Please tell me you're not going to do every single movie.
We're doing all of them, every one of them.
We're doing all of them, but
right.
I will.
Good luck.
Yes, thank you. I know we're going to need it.
What the hell are you going to talk about? It's literally some dude standing around in a pot shop.
We're gonna start
Every
condensing
movie.
them.
Yeah,
we're gonna start condensing.
You're gonna start
do
getting
2 and 3.
Yeah,
we're not doing individual.
Listeners, we're gonna start getting. You're gonna get some Evil Bong triple features probably.
Yeah. We're just
start
gonna,
to
we're
dish
gonna
those
knock
out
this
as 5-minute bonus episodes or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, because everything we've heard about those sequels is that they're going to be pretty rough. So
well, I remember my buddy Brooks, who works at Full Moon, did the one that was like the Gingerweed Man guy.
Yeah.
So I watched one just because Brooks made it, and it was, I'm not like a stoner either, so it's not my there's very little inroad for me there other than the people involved, and so I was like, okay, this is something, and so I went back because I had been sent somewhere along the way, I don't know where it came from, maybe from Brooks or someone who sent me the box set of the Evil Bong movies, and I had no idea there was that many of them, and I was like, this is like Charlie rented a pot shop for 2 days and made a feature of people standing around a pot shop with a little puppet. And I'm sure there must be... I think Charlie figured out that he could sell pot merch by utilizing this format. But for me, I was like, after 10 minutes of one of them, then I was like, maybe we'll try a different one. I put in another one. And 7 minutes of that one, I was like, nope. This is I'm as diehard Full Moon guy as I am. I can't do it.
They're really slow, and they all just feel like they were financed by Spencer's Gifts or something. It's all that kind of level of humor, which is a little hard to sit through. And I mean, in regards to Ghoulies, I could have used maybe a little bit more like stupid humor. I could have used a little bit more like toilet humor, because the really weird thing about Ghoulies, and the thing that you won't really get from looking at that amazing poster, is that the Ghoulies have almost nothing to do with this first film. They're kind of tertiary minions, and most of what this movie is about is this weird kind of satanic panic, sort of like kind of a slasher movie, kind of a possession movie.
Well, you know what's weird too is like when you watch the first film, and I've seen it many times, but I as I mentioned, I kind of went back to watch it again to get into it with you guys today, and it has that opening, and it's like, Jack Nance, David Lynch regular, love Jack Nance, great character actor. He's in there, and there's yeah, and there's a cult sacrifice, and there's the little ghoulies are immediately. I was like John Beekler puppets. I love it. Like that first opening. I think it's pre-credits, right? There's an opening and then the credits roll. Yeah. It's great. It's kind of 80s gold. There's all kinds of stuff there I love. And then the movie proper kicks in, and it's kind of fucking boring for quite a while at that point.
It's really a boring movie, and I think I kept speculating about when I was watching this. I'm like, why was this the one? Why was this the one that tipped? Why was this the one that kind of made Empire what it is today, or what it became in the 80s, and kind of birthed this whole weird movement? And I think, were this movie released in the internet age when like word of mouth could travel a little faster, I don't think this would have had the legs. Well, I think this was benefiting from the fact that we were in a monoculture and you were going to be drawn in by this poster before people could come out and tell you that, like, oh yeah, this, because I don't know anybody that really loves this movie.
List off, if I may, you can list off some disparate elements of this movie that add up to nothing. One, the voiceover stuff that comes in like 3 times.
It's the most jarring, unnecessary narration.
Adds nothing. It's not consistent. It's totally pointless. I have no idea why it's there. So there's that.
It's hilarious too because it comes in. I think the first time it comes in, all it does is narrate the fact that the main character, who's so bland that his name is even escaping me right now.
Jonathan,
the actor or the character?
The character.
His name's Jonathan.
Jonathan, that he is getting drawn back to the box with the relics and stuff inside. It's like, well, yeah, we can tell by the way he's walking and the way he's fixated on the box. Like, you don't need somebody going, and then Jonathan looked over at the box and he was curious. So he slowly
like the voiceover
walked
guy
over.
in the movie.
Thank you. I practiced that.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. I mean, what's the actor's name that plays Peter?
Peter Liapis.
I'll give that guy some credit on one thing. It's a committed performance of a boring character. The guy isn't that bad, really. I mean, if you look at what he has to do, it's not exactly David Mamet material he's working with. So,
it's not a fun role for him.
No, it's a bland role for any actor, and he does his best with it, and when he's shouting and he gives it, and that's all you can really ask of an actress to do that shit. But
yeah, he strikes me as a guy who lost a lot of auditions to Mark Harmon.
Sure, yeah. Also, like,
Jeffrey Combs auditioned for that part and didn't get it, and I'm like,
Combs would have been so much more fun.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, he's playing a 25-year-old. He's 36 in real life. He looks 46. Like, you get some close-ups where he just looks like an old
hairstyles
saddlebag,
don't help anybody.
They do not. No,
like, it's funny when you look at him. There's one scene where he's shirtless, and he's quite a slender, kind of gymnasty build kind of guy.
Sure.
Very slender, kind of narrow. And then he has this huge helmet hair that makes his proportions look very off. I'm like, they should have cut that fucker's hair, but that was the
I always
time.
feel bad for people in these 80s movies. Even like Mariska Hargitay, we mentioned, this is her first movie. She's in her early 20s. Yeah. She's beautiful, but she's saddled with this gigantic mane of hair.
I was like, you have the daughter of Jane Mansfield in this movie, and this is all you can find for her to do? One of the most famously
beautiful women to ever live. Yeah.
Unbelievable, yeah.
It's a bummer. I mean, so, yeah, so we have that satanic element. We have the Tiny Terrors element, and then we have kind of like a horny teens in a cabin in the woods kind of element. But they really missed the balance on this, too, because most horny teen movies, you have archetypes that you go back to, right? And there's usually there's a couple party guys, there's a couple slutty girls, and then there's usually some solid, reliable leading man types. This is all wacky. All of the guys
Zach
are
Galligan
wacky.
Character, and then that kind of thing. If you're gonna use Gremlins, I mean, it's funny too because you look at some of the. There's one thing I will say to give the movie a pat on the back where it deserves it. The 2 guys who play the sort of stoner drunk guys, are pretty good. They're committed. Yeah, and they don't do that 80s thing of going so huge with the stoner or the drunken thing. They're actually, I was watching, I was like, I had buddies who acted pretty comparably to those 2 idiots, and they're pretty good. But it's
I will piggyback off that because Laughing Stoner is my least favorite character introduction.
And you're going to do all the Evil Bong movies.
Movie ever. And
we're gonna get real high for those.
they came
Won't
on
help.
screen, and I rolled my eyes like I do every time characters are introduced this way. But you are correct that they didn't go any bigger than that. That was
No.
sort of it was.
They actually
it
made me
reined
laugh a
in.
few times because
Yeah.
I'm there with you. Usually, those characters in a movie that are supposed to be sort of the comic relief, and this is a podcast, so people can't see it, but I just fucking bunny-eared that. They're never
Yes.
funny. So, to actually have them elicit a few little chuckles from me at times, because just the two guys doing those parts they didn't overdo it. They felt like real dudes that had smoked some pot and had too many drinks. And then you have these really weird caricatures, though, like...
Okay,
like,
I want to spend a minute on Toad Boy here.
I have a long note about that in front of me.
All right, Toad Boy is not an archetype that we've really seen in anything.
No, Ralph
Because
Seymour is the actor who's been in all kinds of genre creds. Yeah.
Love
Yeah,
Ralph Seymour. Yeah,
You might
he's great.
recognize him as a guy who stole Pee-wee's bike for Francis in Pee-wee's Big
Yes,
Adventure.
exactly.
And he's
Yeah.
in one of my favorites, Just Before Dawn, which is a
Yes,
great
that's
Jeff
right. Yeah,
Goldblum
he's
film.
Yeah.
he's in a lot of good stuff, and I think I'm really just wondering what kind of character he's trying to zoom in on here, because he's kind of a nerd, but he's not like a movie nerd where he's sort of shy. He's this bombastically weird nerd who's got some of the weirdest pickup lines of all time. Like he tries to seduce a woman by saying, "Who's this ticklish little girl here?" in a high-pitched voice, and then tickling her and trying to dunk her into a fountain, and that works. Now,
Yeah.
I don't see that. I know the 80s were a very different time, but I don't see that actually working. I see that being a restraining order or some kind of,
Yeah, but
please stay away from me,
This
weird
is a
Toad
Charles
Boy.
Band movie, so that does work, because Charlie would do something like that and hope that it would work, and in his movies it does. So,
Yeah.
that's
It
probably
was-
where that comes from.
We
It was
also
just
have
such a weird move. Oh,
we
yeah.
also have the character of Dick.
Dick,
who-
which you
God.
can call him Dick.
You can. I almost
That
came in with
character,
that in the show,
man.
and then I decided not to for my own
That
sanity.
character.
But I don't understand that character both in costume, style, and performance. The only way I could describe it is if like Morrissey went to audition to play Jack Palance in a biopic.
That's the most
Kinda?
fucking abstract description I could have possibly imagined you would come up. If you had ever asked me
it
what I thought
fits,
you were
yeah.
going to say next, it would not have been that. But
It was a journey.
I just was looking at it and was like, it feels like a part that's supposed to be written for kind of the jock character, I think. But the guy playing it is too weird, unattractive, not particularly muscular or anything. Like, it feels like he's supposed to be that character. But or the opposite, he's supposed to be a dweeb who thinks he's a stud. But no matter what, the guy doing it is so weird. And not any of those things. He's just weird.
He's playing it like a parody of like a guy from the 70s or something. Like
But
this
he's
is
just
a wild
off-putting.
and crazy guy.
He's
Yeah,
off-putting.
he's very
exactly what
off-putting.
it is.
He's very like when he talks to the women around him. I was like, no women would talk to this guy.
No.
Nobody would talk to this guy. You'd be like, fuck off, Dick. Like that's what that would be. It's a very weirdly. I don't know if that's one of those things where I'm like, on the page though, I wonder if the original inception for that character is not went astray with the casting. Like,
Yeah.
I think on the page he's the jock meathead, and then they cast a guy who just couldn't bring that.
He
It
just
doesn't
came to
look
set
like
and
that.
said, "No, guys, I'm going to try something different. Just let me work."
And they were like, "Why did you lose like 60 pounds to do this?" Yeah, because he doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a very, very strange character, and one that's kind of, I don't know. I almost kind of was looking at me like, I would have rather just take him out and just let's focus on Toad Boy and the two stoner guys. Like, we had enough characters that you really don't need that guy. And
Well, you want to
he
know
doesn't
why
bring
this
much.
movie is really not successful? Because we've
I have a
spent
few good
about
ideas
10
about that.
minutes describing human characters and not ghoulies.
well, this
Because
is
the
thing.
Ghoulies don't pop. That's the crazy thing. Like for
Yeah.
a movie called Ghoulies that features them prominently, and like that's supposedly the draw. These characters do not pop at all. Like I don't know
My
what they
favorite
want.
scene in the entire movie is, and it's a tiny little moment, but it's a moment where we get real Charles Band and Gold, and real John Beekler stuff. Is there's a scene where what's the main character's name?
Jonathan.
Yeah.
Jonathan's sitting there and he's reading a book, and the little ghoul is just plunked on the arm of the armchair beside him while he's reading, just hanging out with him. And he hands his book to the ghoul, and the ghoulie takes the book. I think it's the rat ghoulie, and it takes it, and it jumps down, and it goes there and puts the book away from him. Now, in that little moment, I was like, I love the idea of this guy having ghoulies like house pets and just hanging out with them, and that they just chill with him and help him put shit away and stuff. Like, I'd rather see that movie. Just this guy coexisting with his little pet ghoulies that occasionally wreak havoc, you know. That would have been a funny movie.
We actually kind of discussed the same thing when we talked about Subspecies, because Subspecies is another movie that kind of shoehorns in some tiny terrors, right? Like the little the titular characters don't really have any bearing on the plot in that movie. They're just kind of there to help do chores.
Right.
You know, and that's sort of what the Ghoulies are.
Oh my God. My
brain
right now just went to imagining like Wilford Brimley in Battle for Endor, but with a bunch of little ghoulies in his house helping take care of things.
Well, he
Actually,
kind of had that
thing-
with the little goat thing, didn't he? Is that
Yeah, the little
Yeah.
fast thing. Yeah. You
Teak,
kind of
I
had
think
that.
is its name.
Yeah, that's it, Teak. Yeah.
Who's great.
Also
I love
played,
Teak.
Played
Teak's
by
awesome.
played by Tony Cox, who will eventually also play a ghoulie in Ghoulies 4. So there you go.
Wow. See, it all comes full circle, man.
Now, one thing that
I
I
do wanna
think
bring up, too,
deserves
like,
a
that-
shout out about the movie, though, is Mac Alberg, who shot this movie, one of Empire and Full Moon's great DPs. It's a good-looking movie. There's some really beautiful lighting in the movie that doesn't really deserve it. So, you know, there's a few parts in that movie. Now, I don't know if you guys are going to touch on this later, but it's in my head now, so I want to say it. What the fuck is with the makeup on the bad guy at the end? It is the most lazily applied, boring, sad-looking makeup I think I've seen in any Empire or Full Moon picture. Like
It looks like it's just got it fallen off his face. Yeah.
And it's like sort of, you can still see his skin tones under it, and then in another shot he has prosthetics on, then it cuts back. It's this bad Halloween kind of powder makeup. I was like, what is going on in this sequence that this makeup is like this?
I was saying that a lot. Like, this is actually this is only the second time I've seen this movie, but I really have a hard time parsing through like the plot and the mythology here. Like, fully halfway through the movie, we get the introduction of two new characters, which
dwarves,
is Greedy Guts and Grizzle, who are
Why?
And again, this is going to Charles Band's kind of like showman like casting. Like they were making a big deal at the time about these are the two shortest actors who've ever appeared in a film. They both stand about 2 foot.
I wish they hadn't.
And so like they were kind of trying to hype it up a little bit based on
But
that.
why
And
are
I
they?
think they're
Why
both
are they?
good.
Why are they
But
in the
who
movie?
are they?
Why
are
they
they there?
in the movie?
We already have 4 ghoulies that are not being.
We're
They're
here
not
to
doing
see the
anything.
little demons, and then all of a sudden these little fucking dwarves appear, and I was like, "What? That's not what I'm here for." Get them.
And these are like kind of
Like-
morally ambiguous. Like I never really know what their end game is. Like they
just
seem to be
seem-
allies. They seem to not.
Again, they just seem they're sort of henchmen though, like the Ghoulies. I was like, how many like workers do these demons? These are lazy fucking demons who can't put their own books away and shit, and have to call out demons and the Ghoulies and dwarves and like just do your own fucking chores and stop calling everything that you can think of from the underworld to put your books away. Like
Ghoulies
ostensibly,
is-
a breakdown of this movie exists where it's like an evil sorcerer brings all kinds of shit back from the underworld to do his chores for him.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
much
that's-
what it is.
That's exactly it. And like, so I just found myself like kind of baffled that this was the big tipping point movie. This is the one that kind of made
Well,
it
it's
all
funny,
happen.
too,
just
like, to
because
the-
there's so little there.
But to the extent, Steve, where like, well, I've talked to Charlie about this at length because one of the things that I always thought was interesting is if you look at, for Bob Shea, what Freddy Krueger was, Freddy's often just like, New Line was called the house that Freddy built.
Yeah.
And on some level, Ghoulies built Empire. With no Ghoulies, Charlie wouldn't have continued a distribution model if that hadn't worked. And not only did it work so well that he, you know, and without Charlie continuing that distribution model that succeeded with Ghoulies, you don't have Full Moon years later. So you can't understate the
success of-
importance of this rather, frankly, lackluster movie. But
It's crazy, yeah, but yeah, no, he talks about it a lot in his book. He spent $500,000 for a marketing push in New York and the suburbs. Like that's because he got advice from an old showbiz guy who told him like if you can get penetration in this market, then you can go wide and you have a hit on your hands. And that's what wound up happening for him. But it easily could have gone the other way. It easily could have been like nobody shows up to see this, and then we don't get Empire, we don't get, Trancers would not be released later this
Yeah.
year, and all these other kind of more reputable movies. But it is just kind of a really weird kind of little flash in the pan sort of moment, because these are not movies that have endured. These are not movies that people look back on
The
very
poster has.
fondly.
Yeah.
The poster has.
The poster has endured, and
The poster is in conversation. When a bunch of guys our
Yeah.
age sit down together and shoot the shit about horror movies, and we talk about our favorite box art that we looked at as kids. I mean, Ghoulies it's in that conversation. I mean,
Well, and
it's
I think it's also, and I know we're talking about the first one. We'll get to the second one. But I think it also helps that the second one is a vast improvement.
I would agree, because the first one, I think the problem with this is a double-edged toilet. Okay, let's a $30 million double-edged toilet. I'm really going hard on these metaphors today, because that is promising a more whimsical, funny movie than I think the Ghoulies is. The Ghoulies as a movie is pretty straight-faced.
Well, and I think it's
not
also
funny.
you're being sold kind of a lie with that poster, because you get into the movie and it's primarily all this cult shit that isn't that interesting.
Well, it was
And
1984, so you're contractually obligated to have some kind of satanic panic in your movie.
Well, and the problem with it is it's half baked and it's boring. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff in the movie. I just want the creatures.
Yeah.
I'm here to see the little monster. I don't want to see the rock star Sting guy doing his little with his bad makeup
Right.
and little dwarves and all this other shit.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see the little monsters. And when they're in the movie for, I don't know what their total screen time is, probably like 8 minutes or something.
Yeah.
It feels like imagine if you'd gone to see Gremlins and the fucking creatures had been in the movie for 8 minutes. You would have felt pretty ripped off. So
Well, and that's just the thing. Like, while this wasn't designed to be a Gremlins ripoff, it did, because of financing issues, it got pushed to early 1985. By that time, Gremlins was a bona fide super hit. And so people might have been going to this anticipating a little bit of that mischievous comedy horror kind of magic that Gremlins tapped into. And that's really not what they get. But if we do want to transition over to Ghoulies 2, I would argue Ghoulies 2 definitely gives you a little bit more of that.
I'm 100% in agreement with you, Steve. But before we transition to Ghoulies 2, there is one thing that I want to talk about this movie. And I do think there's two areas where the footprint of this movie outside of its poster can be seen. One of them is, I think, after the cold open scene, you get Richard Band's score, which is a fun, whimsical score. And you'll see where I'm going.
It's a great opening theme, yeah. And
it
Richard
is.
always, on almost every Charlie Band film that has Richard's music always elevates any Empire full movie.
Yeah, and you'll see where I'm
Richard's
going
such
with
a
this in a second,
maestro.
because it also, the scene of them with all of their sunglasses on at dinner for this weird seance dinner party, Beetlejuice owes a debt of gratitude for these two aspects, because the Danny Elfman's Beetlejuice main theme, I feel like, borrows a decent amount from Richard Band's Ghoulies theme.
Isn't it weird
And-
how Elfman-esque it sounds when you listen to the Ghoulies theme? Like it's,
Mm-hmm.
And he
and
was
I
still
know
in
it's
Oingo Boingo at this time. Yeah, he wasn't even composing.
I know. It's weird. It feels very Elfman-esque, and Richard and Elfman do have some touch points that I think make them comparable composers. But that goes. I agree with you. It is very Beetlejuicy. I mean, the difference here, I guess, being that Beetlejuice had Catherine O'Hare, and this scene has Dick. So
Yes.
yeah. No.
And Toad Boy. We can't do. I will not stand for Toad Boy erasure here. He makes the movie. No, he doesn't.
No.
Yeah, it is a weird seance of a dinner scene, though. So I feel like in that
The
regard,
other
like
thing
it
I don't get at
harkens
all
to
in that
Beetlejuice.
scene, maybe one of you can clarify for me.
I
I
don't
don't
think I can.
understand why they don't see the Ghoulies. The Ghoulies
Well-
are there doing things, and they don't seem to see. Is it just because the tint on their fucking sunglasses is too
Well,
strong? Or
Kevin, I
what's
don't
the
know if you
concept
know
there?
this, but when you put sunglasses on, you are legally blind.
Blind. That seems to be what they're suggesting.
Yes, that's the
It
hard
makes
science
zero
behind this
sense
dinner.
yet again. There is a great.
I should.
There is
Oh,
a great
I-
moment there, though, when they all start shrieking and it cuts to shots of the little Ghoulies going, ah! Or I was like,
Yeah.
that's great.
With their eyes rolling back in their heads too.
And
like
there's
that was-
actually, it's brutal. And I'm sure maybe when it was on 35 and Grain helped it out, there's a brutal moment where the cat Ghoulie, who's my favorite Ghoulie, I have him here. This guy.
Ah, that's a good looking model there. Yeah,
That
Yeah.
is wow.
It's a plushie.
it's they're all screaming. The cackle is screaming, and you can see the puppeteer's fingers in the cackle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Oh, man.
"Ew."
There's a lot of that in these movies.
For
and
as
I
much
kinda love
as
it.
we've pointed out, it's like one thing that also doesn't. Time hasn't really been kind to this movie's. HD hasn't been kind to
I think that's
some
what it
aspects
is,
of this
yeah.
movie.
But there's something, and look, John Buechler is a fucking hero of mine. I love John Buechler. And
He's
I love,
amazing.
He rules.
He's the best. And I remember Steve Kostansky was on my podcast, the director of Psycho Goreman, and we were talking about the brilliance of John Buechler's very kind of handmade, do it yourself kind of style of making these little creatures and puppets, and they do look rubbery, and they do, but there's a charm to them, and there's something endearing about the creatures that he made.
Yeah.
And I think you particularly as you get into Ghoulies 2 and the creatures are better done. If you look at the creatures in John Buechler, I don't know if he had more time or more money, but the puppets are much better, and they move more, and they're more dexterous, and that's the thing is, like, you want these creatures and John Buechler to do his thing with them. So when you're getting, I don't remember the name of the guy. He looks like fucking Sting, the sorcerer guy.
Malcolm in the movie, the actor is Michael DeBar.
And if I'm not mistaken, he is like a rock star in real life. Which, if you watch him in interviews, he wears purple tinted sunglasses and has like leather bracelets. And he's like, "Oh man, well I did Ghoulies." Like, he's very like it's. But it's one of those performances where I'm like, how do you do that role well? It's such an underwritten, half-baked villain. Like, I don't even know what his motivation is or what he has to say the line, "Kiss me, my son," and sell it.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very odd moment.
A paycheck for one day of work is how you get through that line.
I just looked that up. He was the lead singer of the Knack. So My Sharona, that's the guy.
Yeah.
Wow, I did not make that connection.
I knew
together.
I knew he had done something of no. I couldn't remember what it was. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't
That's
recognize
a
him
big
without
band.
a skinny tie.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because when you look at him in the movie, he has this rock star gait about him. He has that quality. I mean, I was
does.
just like, he's got a Sting thing going on.
He does, for sure.
And and then Jack Nance, who's such an interesting actor and all the Lynch stuff, is a fucking mannequin in this movie. He
He's
has nothing
wasted
to
here.
do. He's totally, utterly wasted.
I forgot he was in the movie.
Totally.
for
And then he
most of
pops
it.
up again at the end, and I was like, wait, oh, he didn't have a beard at the beginning. Right. That. Like,
Yeah.
again,
That's called character development.
Yeah, give him plaster a beard on him, and it's funny because there's people here, John Buechler, Richard Band, John Buechler, Matt Goldberg, all these different people that we've talked about who are all part of that Charlie universe, and they're all here on this movie, and in so many other occasions that formula works. Now I don't mean to shit talk, but I think a lot of it has to do with the direction in this movie. This director,
He was a first timer. Yeah.
You can see that.
See some.
There's
some
it's
rustiness.
a fairly styleless movie. There is very little done by the filmmaker to heighten anything. The camera is kind of just placed in very sort of staticky wide shots most of the time. It's
poorly paced. It's poorly edited.
take someone like Mac Elberg and put him with Stuart Gordon, a first-time director on Reanimator, and look at the outcome, right? So
exactly.
like here, it just I think that's a big part of the problem was that this is a guy too whose background was as an actor, not as a director. So
Yeah.
I think it shows.
I think
Well,
we can
I
all.
think this is actually a good way to transition to Ghoulies 2 because this is a movie that did have a little bit of a surer hand behind it.
Yeah.
So let me just drop a couple of details here. Ghoulies 2 was released July 31st, 1987, directed by Albert Band and written by Dennis Paoli, Charlie Dolan, and Luca Bercovici. And it stars Damon Martin, Royal Dano, Phil Fondacaro, Carrie Remsen, and Jay Downing. Now, this is the first time on our show that Albert Band has come up, so I just want to take a quick second to do a bio of him because
you guys haven't talked about Albert yet? Oh,
No,
yeah.
not
he
yet.
hasn't come up directly yet. No, he's always been involved and in the periphery. But Albert Band is none other than Charlie Band's father. A really interesting guy. He grew up in Paris and born to Jewish parents. And his father was Max Band, who was a really respected artist who actually did the bust. He sculpted the bust of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And according to family lore, at least according to Charlie's book, Max was in the room with FDR working on that sculpture when FDR got the news about Paris being invaded by the Nazis. And it was because he was in that room and because he had this relationship with the president that he was able to fast track getting his family expedited from Paris to Hollywood. And that's where Albert spent most of his life. He grew up there. He went to Hollywood High School. He became a low-budget film producer in the 50s, made a lot of fancy friends, including Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio, who apparently babysat for young Charlie, which is a pretty wild little detail from his autobiography. Yeah.
I thought Marilyn Monroe was the one who babysat Charlie.
I think they were both involved. Yeah, I think they would both pop by, but
Joe
they were
DiMaggio
married at the time. Yeah,
babysitting?
right.
That's weird. Okay.
But yeah, so he became the producer for low-budget movies like I Bury the Living and Face of Fire. And he moved over in the 50s to the Italian film market, which was kind of growing at the time. And he worked on a lot of like low-budget horror and Hercules and spaghetti westerns at the time. And that's where young Charlie Band would actually appear in some of those movies. So he's in some of those early
Albert
Hercules
also,
movies as a
just
child.
to chime in for a sec, had a long-standing relationship with the iconic John Huston, working on his films. And I think he was, I don't know if he was the AD or what his role was, but he worked on several John Huston movies. And so Albert's background was working on some pretty big shows with
Absolutely.
big people
Yeah,
like
and
John Huston, yeah.
And this is part of the reason why Charlie Band has such an affinity for Italy, because he spent most of his life there, most of his young adult life.
Doing spaghetti westerns and shit with his dad, yeah.
Yeah, he's fluent in Italian, and that's why when Empire was setting up their studio, they bought Dino De Laurentiis' old studio and kind of converted to that and worked out of Rome. From everything I've read in the book, Albert and Charlie were extraordinarily close. Charlie really loved and admired his father and gave him as much work as he could when they started developing Full Moon and all of these features like that. So Albert did die in 2002. It was something that Charlie was particularly devastated by. But he gave him a lot of work, and they spent a lot of time together. It sounds like he was a good dude.
He was quite elderly too, wasn't he?
He was. He was a very old man when he passed. But yeah, that's the first time that we've really had a moment to talk about Albert, and I wanted to shout him out because he is very much integral to the DNA of kind of everything that's happening.
Oh, for sure. And
here.
Albert is, I think it's important when you in any conversation about Charlie Band to note that not only was Albert, kind of Charlie's hero, and rightfully so, but Albert, by reputation, was a lovely guy, and people really loved being around him and working with him. He was a consummate professional, but a lot of fun, a sweet man, a professional, like a taskmaster at times too, I understand, but come on, camera, hold on, sorry guys. I don't know why the focus just went on this thing. That was weird, huh?
Yeah, it's all good. There you are.
But I think Albert was, for Charlie, the reason Charlie got into show business. I mean, if Albert wasn't, in Charlie's book, he talks about starting his nightclubs and stuff. I think Charlie's entrepreneurial spirit is just, I think that's just Charlie. But I think channeling it into show business was the perfect combination of Charlie's love of comic books and fantasy and all the, and Richard in particular is much more of a fantasy guy than a horror guy.
Yeah.
But Charlie's kind of he likes genre stuff, sci-fi, fantasy, comic books, all that stuff. Yeah. So Charlie's ability to kind of merge that love with industry, which was built into Charlie, and then because his father was in show business, you see all these elements set up to Charlie becoming this, like Charlie didn't just go off and become a producer. He started a studio. So that's,
He became a distributor. He became kind of a jack of all trades. Yeah.
And you can almost, a lot of that has to do with Albert and that relationship.
I would agree with you. And I think you can almost tell that this sequel is in more assured hands from minute one.
Yes.
And also it brings
100%.
us into something we've been encountering a lot on the show of late, which would be like freak shows and exhibits and sideshows, which is obviously a big motif in a lot of these movies. We recently recorded an episode on Meridian, which we'll talk more about Phil Fondacaro momentarily. But this one also like
I
I
like
said,
Meridian. Meridian's fun. I like Meridian.
yeah, we have a really well. Hopefully, by the time this drops, our listeners will have had a chance to listen to our episode on that one. But
The
one
werewolf
thing
stolen
I
from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
yeah, oh
Yes,
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah,
one of
yeah.
our favorite anecdotes, telling that we had a blast with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carnival chaos is what I'll call it. Is a genre that I love personally watching things like run amok in a carnival. It's just an aesthetic, like a county fair aesthetic that I really enjoy.
Well, especially because
seeing.
they're not really around anymore, right? So it's like I don't know about where you guys
No.
live, but there's no circuses or for good reasons. That you look at how exploitive a lot of those things were for animals and for little people, and you know there's an ick factor to some of it, but there's also a part of me that romanticizes it from when they were around, and I'm old enough to have been to some of them.
Exactly.
Well, I think Charles Band takes a lot of inspiration from this too, because indirectly, because he's built sort of this like pitchman persona around himself based
like
off
a barker.
of Stan Lee.
Yeah, he's a carnival
Yeah, exactly.
barker himself,
Stan Lee would do the same thing.
Well, and when Charlie had his full moon traveling road show, right? That's totally.
It's one of I like that vibe because it's like you know that this person is kind of pulling the wool over your eyes a little bit, but they're so charming and they're so enthusiastic about it, and they're kind of on the level about how not on the level they are. You know, so there's something kind of endearing and charming about that, and I think a lot of starting with the Video Zone, I think that was a lot of Charlie Band's persona that he was putting out there.
Yeah,
So
I think it's with Ghoulies too. I think it's the best of the Ghoulies films. You know, the Ghoulies Go to College one, the third one has some fun bits in it. The fourth one's not worth talking about, and the first one's important for the reasons we talked about, but it doesn't quite work as well as a movie. But this one for me works, and I think Albert has a lot to. It's written by fucking Dennis Paoli, who's so overqualified to write Ghoulies too.
He really is.
Like brilliant.
No, this one has a
like,
lot more sense of what it wants to be.
Yeah,
Like, this
even
is
when
actually
you
going
look
to
at
be
that
the
opening
last
shot with Royal Dano in the truck with his nephew, and
Nephew,
yeah.
they're talking about the moon. There's already a sense of wonder and of the music in that little sequence, that little bit in the truck with Royal Dano. First of all, I'll get into some more because I have so much affection for him, but that bit it establishes a tone and mood that you never even get throughout all of the first movie. And right away, for me, watching the second, I was like, already this is a more assured movie to me. And it can maintain that. So, you know.
And I think it's helping that this one is being made after Gremlins became a hit. And so I think they have a better idea. It's like, okay, we need the focus to be on the Ghoulies. We need to know what their personalities are and kind of spend a little bit more time with them. And we get into the kind of like malicious mischief sort of thing that the Gremlins get into, where these are dangerous, but they're also kind of comical. You know, and this is actually going to be the last Ghoulies movie associated with Charles Band, because when Empire was starting to struggle, this was like the biggest name that they had in their stable, and they sold it to Vestron Video. So Ghoulies 3 and Ghoulies 4 were both developed by Vestron.
Well, and
so
interestingly
technically,
enough,
we don't need to get into those movies, but we can.
But interestingly
sorry,
enough,
fans,
John
we
Buechler,
won't.
who was supposed to do this movie, ended up doing the next one, which wasn't done by Charlie. So
right, he directed Ghoulies Go to College. Yeah,
he was supposed to do this movie, and it's very interesting to me how no one will say why he didn't. If you hear different people talking about why John Buechler didn't end up doing Ghoulies 2, it's like, well, he left or something. And I was like, what's weird to me about that is if John was fired, well, he still did the effects on this picture, so he was around for the whole shoot.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Friday 7 come out the same year?
I think the next year. I think 88 it came out.
I don't think it was a scheduling thing. Because if it was a scheduling thing, that's what people would be saying, and no one will say that.
Plus,
there's something nebulous
you could probably
about it.
find 5 days to shoot Ghoulies 2.
And I think
let's be honest.
I don't know either if it was an issue of there was a lot of logistics going on for Ghoulies 2 because it was shot in Italy and all that stuff. I don't know if John was even there. I think he prepped the movie, and then he sent Bill Butler and Mike Deak and some of his regular guys to oversee the effects. But I don't even know how much John would have been in Italy. So, you know, and one thing it's worth noting, too, is probably because the script required so much more of the creatures in this film, how much more effective the puppets and the creatures are in this particular movie.
This is definitely the thing that pops out. I mean, first of all, this movie all but strikes all of the satanic cult stuff.
Thank God,
like,
right?
We
they
get,
show up
yeah,
for
we
half
get
a second at the beginning, and then we never see them again.
Well, you know,
It's
when
never
we
followed
get
up
it, we
upon.
get it in a line of dialogue from the cop at the end who says he's being questioned, and he says it was those teenagers listening to that heavy metal devil music, and that's about
Yeah.
all it's really. That yeah.
That's about all we need, you know, because like that's not the important part of the Ghoulies story anymore.
No, we don't give
you
a
know?
shit
So
about
this-
any of that. Yeah.
No.
They basically they tag along with the traveling carnival, and they inadvertently make themselves sort of the star attraction. People are coming to see these little monsters doing things, you know, and that's kind of a fun angle. It's just like, oh, hey, we were like these little demon servant monsters, and now we are stars of the show, you know. And I think the movie
Well,
has a little bit of fun with
I think
that.
it probably was also Charlie getting feedback from people who saw the first one. Went, where the hell are the? We wanted to see the creatures, so Charlie went, okay, you know, I can have an idea of how this meeting would have gone. Like Charlie's talking to Dennis Paoli, and Dennis going, what do you want me to do with this? I want you to take the Ghoulies, get rid of all the satanic shit. I just want to see more of the creatures, and they're at a circus. Go.
Yeah.
And Dennis went and wrote what is actually a really fun script. There's some cracking little lines in this movie, and it's a well-written little horror. And it's also interesting because it's the only Empire sequel. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, because
yeah.
all the Transfers movies were full moon. Yeah,
right.
That is a crazy factoid to think about, because I think when you think about Empire, you think about Charlie Band, you think about these guys cranking
Sequels.
movies out,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
yeah.
would think sequel. But you're right. Yeah, this is the only
Well, and
Empire sequel,
sequels-
or first, I should
Sequels
say.
historically were not very profitable, probably until around the mid '80s or early '90s.
I mean,
That's
this was
when,
about
like,
when they
yeah.
started to really go, for sure. And I think it's it's interesting too when you're. I mean, you look at there's again a really qualified group of people making this movie. Sergio Savati, who shot it, was Lucio Fulci's DP. I mean, it's
oh shit.
You know what I mean? He shot From Beyond and Zombie. Not From Beyond, sorry, The Beyond.
The Beyond.
Is the stop motion here Dave Allen?
It is, and that's the
It
other
is,
thing.
yeah.
to mention.
You can tell you get a little bit of that.
Yeah.
You get more of
That
the
Dave
puppets,
Allen
and you
magic.
also get to see their feet. Basically, you get to see that these things are mostly
And I
have
always
little
think
cloven
that
hooves.
anytime David Allen comes in and does this thing to just, even if it's a few shots, that little bit of stop motion gives the creatures some magic. Because David Allen's stuff, to me, always adds magic to it. I mean, David Allen's... Look at the Puppet Master movie as a prime example of that. After 5, when David was gone, the puppets never had the same presence again because all the stop motion was gone. So I think
We had a nice conversation with Nat Bremer, who wrote the Puppet Master Complete Guide, about just the shot with Charlie Spradling and Blade in Puppet Master 2, and just like what a marvel of stop motion animation it is.
Yeah, I have a special coming up on Spill Your Guts all about David Allen, and I've spoken with all kinds of people that worked with David, and including Charlie and Chris Endicott, and you know, Primeval is sort of the focal point, but it's a lot of people who Puppet Masters talk about all that kind of stuff. But David's kind of I don't know, his obsession with getting it right and David, I think, almost saw himself as making his own movie that was going to go into someone else's movie. There's a quality of that. David was sort of left alone to do his thing, and so when you see there's only a handful of shots in Ghoulies 2 that have stop motion, but it always adds a magical. I always love seeing those shots. And I think in Ghoulies 2. It's primarily when you see them they break out of the tent and they walk out and there's the moon and they look around and they go off, and it's not that it looks real. I don't want it to look real anyway. Stop motion is not about it looking real.
No.
It's that it just has this again, that handmade quality that David Allen and guys like John Buechler brought to these movies. And I think the other thing Ghoulies 2 has going for it that isn't there for the first one is a much more fun game cast. Royal Dano is like a great fucking character actor who elevated pretty much everything. Look at him in House 2. He steals that movie, and there's good actors in it.
He's great at playing kind of like a grizzled but like good-hearted older drunk.
And it's hard not to have anyone who knows Royal Dano probably has the association of Something Wicked This Way Comes. Itself a Shakespeare quote at a carnival, and here you have a Shakespeare quoting Phil Fondacaro, at a carnival and Royal Dano. There's this kind of it all sort of starts to weave in and out of that for me. But Royal Dano
Again,
go ahead.
I absolutely love Fondacaro in this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
lovely,
really coming
yeah.
to appreciate like what he brings to a
Yeah.
lot of these full moon.
Well, he's
movies,
just a really
because
good
I think
fucking actor, right? That's
he's a really good actor,
Yeah.
and because he's a little person, he tends to be hidden behind like makeup or costumes and things like that. And Charlie Band really let him
yeah.
play human characters who
I
get to
think-
show their face and have dialogue.
And I think
he gets
Ghoulies
to make
2
the
is
most
one of
that.
his best parts because he's really
Yeah.
he's in it quite a bit, and it's
is.
quite a touching character. It's kind of a
Yeah.
lovely role.
Right,
for
and he's
him.
not
Yeah, there's a
part
really
of
nice
the
moment where,
sideshow.
like-
He's just an employee.
Yeah, and
No, there's a really nice moment here where like Larry or whatever the main guy
Yeah.
blows up at him and like makes a height comment about him, and he looks genuinely
Pained,
pained. Like,
yeah.
he's like, oh, I can't believe like my friend would actually do this to me. Like,
Yeah.
he's very good in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think his name's Damon Martin, the main,
Yeah.
who I like, and he was in some other horror stuff. He was in Amityville. It's About Time, which I have great affection for. It's a totally underrated Amityville movie. When there are 30 of them,
Yeah,
it's one of the few.
He's
good-
fine.
He's affable.
He's kind
you know
of
what I mean?
unobtrusive here.
Yeah,
Yeah, but,
and
yeah.
he's sort of cute. He's a little, you know, this movie has a nice balance for the ladies and the gay guys of having some hunky guys in it, not just being a bunch of naked women. So
Sure.
And I feel like Jay Downing does a nice job as the preppy
Judge
snob.
Reinhold
He
character?
playing the
Yeah,
Andrew
yeah, yeah.
McCarthy or Judge
Yeah.
Reinhold character.
yeah.
sure.
Pretty well. And then you've got the girl from
if anything,
Pumpkinhead.
I think the girl has no presence in that movie.
Yeah, I just know her as the girl from
She doesn't-
Pumpkinhead.
Yeah, she doesn't. She's not really given anything.
No, she
to
doesn't really
do, but-
register because I think
I am curious about what like investment firm or whatever that the Jay Harding character is like working with. That feels like we're traveling carnivals a big business. Like, does he really need to
it makes
be there
no sense.
monitoring
It makes
this?
no sense.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
It's like I really need to be on the
No.
ground here. For
I don't
this
think there were
knife-throwing
corporate
act.
run carnivals, but I
No, but you know who our number one enemy was at the time? Yuppies.
Yuppies.
Well,
We
they
needed a
still are,
yuppie
right?
for, well, yes, but in cinema we needed a yuppie, and we needed a yuppie for the fish ghoulie to come out of the toilet and get in the end.
I think
Finally delivering on that promise.
this
yeah.
movie though has a very important kind of step into their stardom, rise into their role of their acclaim for Cat Ghoulie, who really comes into his own here, and I think that's why there's a like a statue of him and shit now, because he has that great bit where the girl loses her cat Muffy or Buffy or something, and she's wandering around.
Oh
looking.
yeah.
And then first of all, there's that bizarre, barely speaks a lick of English, like muscle man who's like, everyone's seen your Muffy or whatever, and some
Right,
completely
yeah.
inappropriate sexual remark, and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And he could be her father. It's a really weird moment. And then he walks off, and then they come, and the cat is going meow meow, and then starts like cutting on her with a razor blade. I was like, this Ghoulie's fucking rad, and I like his design.
Right.
He's a great looking
Now-
creature.
I need some clarity here because I was not able to tell from the movie. Is the flying ghoulie and that like alligator looking one, are they the same ghoulie?
No.
Or is there two? they are
They're
different.
separate. Yeah.
Okay, because
yeah.
there's the fish ghoulie, there's the rat, there's the cat, there's the alligator,
there's
and then
two-
there's the flying one that you
well,
never
the
really
flying
see
one was in
clearly.
the first movie. He's in the first movie. He's very shoddily executed. The puppet
I was gonna
looks
say
fine.
he did not register at all.
Oh, he's because I don't think they figured out how to use him, like the actual fucking
No.
puppet. And the kind of lizard ghoulie, I don't really know what he is. I like his design. He's kind of cute actually with those. He's got like
Yeah.
for some reason he has very cute eyes.
He looks like kind of something from the Dark Crystal.
Now,
or
am I
something,
weird
you
here
know?
though, or like
That's
don't
right.
you think the thing that's funny about the ghoulies is even though they're supposed to be horrible, they're still cute?
They are a little cute, and I think
Right?
that's
Like-
the same juice that the Gremlins has
For
too.
sure.
Like the Gremlins, even when they're scaly and mean, they're still a little.
Well,
cute,
in this
you know,
movie,
so.
there's also a grossness factor that's not really in the first movie, and there's a weird meta moment for anybody who was coming of age around the early '90s watching Nickelodeon, where you get to see
Spitting
Donnie
into the
Jeffcoat,
slime.
Donnie Jeffcoat, the former host of What Wild and Crazy Kids, get a bunch of Nickelodeon gack thrown on
Yeah.
him from
Well,
from one of these ghoulies.
and it's cool.
There is a line of dialogue I wrote down where the kid was excitedly saying, "Oh, it spit goo all over me," and someone in the background goes, "I love that stuff." Like, what? You love
an
goo?
interesting line.
You love being covered in
Some
goo?
of the funniest
Yeah.
ADR.
That's interesting. And now, I mean, it's also kind of funny when you think that, you know, a guy like Dennis Paoli, who wrote worked with guys like Stuart Gordon and wrote mostly like Lovecraft stuff, sure, so it's not an original property, but he got to kind of make it his own. But here, this is Paoli doing a complete sequel creature. It's not really something you see in Dennis Paoli's resume, and I'm looking at it here going, he must have had a blast coming up with all these set pieces, like, because there's some pretty good ones, like,
yeah,
you know, they've got a Pit and a Pendulum kind of set up going, and they've got like I love this scene where Royal Dano and the Ghoulies have their face off, and they stab him, but they hit his playing cards. He's like, "You can't kill me, I'm a magician," and like, and then the rat's biting it, and they zap, like, just. But what I love in a scene like that is, and this is what the first one doesn't have any of, is Royal Dano makes us believe in those little monsters for a minute, because he interacts with them in a way where he sells it. Like, Royal Dano's a great actor for that. He knows to commit to those scenes, and so he's actually like looking at the little monsters and reacting to them in a way that feels committed. Is it not weird when you look at the first one to see there's not ever really a scene of everyone marveling at these little creatures, like, oh my god, what are they? Like, that never really happens. So here,
well, they have sunglasses on, so they can't see them.
That's right. They're legally blind with their sunglasses on.
Here's a question about this. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I agree. There's no moment where people just get to process that these are horrible monsters. People just assume they're part of the carnival and go with it.
Yeah.
And even when we get the giant ghoulie by the end of the movie, like, people are not really reacting to it like.
Well, and
like
it's also
really fucking.
ghoulie. There's some really weird moments that, you know, I love, where, like, I think my favorite one is when those kids see the rat ghoulie, and first of all, the one kid's like, "No, it's a rat," and I'm like, "This kid's fucking stupid. What rat? Like, you ever seen a rat? Look at this thing." And then they go running out, and they get like a horde of people, like a large crowd of adults around them, and they're like, "Oh, there's this rat, and it ate my ninja star," and all the adults are like, "Whoa," and totally believe them.
I was going to say, you just glossed over my favorite part of that scene, which is that this kid pulls out a ninja star and throws it into the mouth of a ghoulie.
Not a plastic one, an actual ninja star. Yeah.
We all carried ninja stars around with us everywhere in the 80s.
I'm Canadian. We're not allowed to have weapons.
Oh, that's fair. Okay. All right.
Well, can I ask you this then, Kevin? As a Canadian, were you allowed to travel around with your tunes? With a little red boombox of your tunes.
As long as it was Gordon Lightfoot or Neil Young, it was permitted. Yeah.
Joni Mitchell was allowed.
Yeah.
That's all you get. That's all you get.
Yeah, I love that there's I think it might have been a cut scene. Oh no, it's in there where Billy Butler, who appears in this movie because they're out in Italy and they have all these actors who can't speak English in the movie being dubbed over, and Billy Butler and Mike Deak, who are there for John Beekler to do effects, why don't you just let us be in the movie? We speak English and we're here. So they both end up in the movie, and Butler, who's gone on to become a Full Moon director staple, like he's directed all kinds of movies for Full Moon, Demonic Toys 2, and he's got the Baby Oopsie movies, all kinds of shit. He shows up and gets it. Now this is another interesting thing I guess should be of note, is this movie was shot as an R movie with gore, and a lot of that got taken out to get a PG rating. You can see it on this. I'm sure it'll be on the new release that comes out in September. There's a 4K version of Ghoulies 1, and I don't know if there's a 4K of 2. I think it's just Blu-ray. But on the Scream Factory Blu-ray, they have all the gore that was cut out that you can watch, and it's too bad because I'm always like, leave the gore. No matter what, I'm always a fan of leave the gore. And it's weird too because it's not particularly gruesome gore. It's still kind of pulpy fun gore. I don't know why they decided to make this, especially when you consider that Ghoulies 2 didn't really have a full theatrical release. It kind of half-assed preview screenings over here and there, and then went straight to video. I don't know why they felt they needed a PG rating, but that's what they did.
It felt like they kind of knew they got away with something with the first Ghoulies, like with that becoming such a huge
except
hit,
that movie's anti-scary. There's nothing scary about Ghoulies.
Right, yeah. And so, I mean, well, except for all the people who are, the kids who were apparently traumatized by that poster. We neglected to mention that. Yeah. Apparently Charlie's band got a lot of letters from parents saying that their kids are too afraid to use the toilet.
I wonder if I'm sure I'm wrong, but I wonder if Charlie might be exaggerating some of that a bit. But I could be wrong.
Are you,
I'm not
insinuating
yeah.
that he would ever embellish a story?
No,
For
I'm
any
full on
number
saying
of-
that he would. I'm fully saying that Charlie would do that, but he's a showman.
Which
right? Like,
I don't know the man, but I think he'd be the first person to admit that he does that.
Charlie
Yeah,
has a wonderful way of doing that, where if you ask him something, he'll give you an answer, and then you go, "No, but really," and he'll go, "Well," and you kind of like, "Okay," like it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Big Fish, like Albert Finney's
Finney.
character in that. A bit of that, like, if it makes the story better, is it lying? Like,
Yeah.
and some people would say, yes, it is. And some people would say, oh, gives a shit anyway. When we're talking about a Ghoulie poster and whatever, like, how important really is what we're talking about. So if you want to embellish, go for it. But
Absolutely.
But I think it's, it's fun in the second one, too, to consider that I think the second film is very much the template that Full Moon would work from in terms of how to do a little creature movie.
I think so.
And I think it helps that it has, Sasha Jensen from Halloween 4 and Dazed and Confused has a bit part in it.
Which,
Starring
by the
Dreef,
way,
who showed up later in Vampire Journals.
so
underrated
Star and
technical
Dreef,
movie, like-
that's Sasha Jensen's girlfriend in this.
Yes, that's right.
Can we talk for a second about the fucking disgusting scene of them getting their faces stuck together with
I love
gooey
that.
slime?
That's great. Yeah,
it's a
fantastic.
great gross out moment. I just
Yeah.
like slime and gack going in like mouths and orifices like that will make me shudder always. I mean, it's not scary, but it turns my stomach. And then it's kind of funny how they have to then like guide
Walk
each
out.
other out of
Yeah.
That poor girl, like his hand has to be stuck in her boob while they're walking out of
Yeah.
there for that gag, and
That's the thing, right? Is when we're talking about Ghoulies 2, we're talking about all these gags, but we're actually kind of laughing and having fun talking about them. In the first one, the gags there aren't really gags. They don't really,
There aren't
you know
any
what I mean?
gags,
So
yeah.
this movie, I think, like, is Ghoulies 2 great cinema? On some level, yes,
No,
it is,
look,
actually. It's really well made. It's really well shot. It's really well written. But
comparatively, absolutely. Look, I didn't love this movie. It's still pretty flawed. It's got some slow bits, but I think it has more of a sense of what it wants to be than the first movie, which is just kind of this weird genre hodgepodge that never really settles on one direction.
I like to think of
and
the
ultimately just
first
kind of leaves it adrift.
movie as an undercooked movie souffle baked with lots of ideas that don't quite have time to gestate. There's some interesting stuff, but they don't really get a chance to do much with it. Whereas I feel like this movie is what you pay the price of admission for a Ghoulies movie.
right.
This is what you
like
want to
stupid
see.
memes you see where it's like, this person did this, so this could run. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
Right, yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like Ghoulies existed so they could figure out all the things not to do for a Ghoulies 2.
It's a cautionary tale to get us to
Kind of,
Ghoulies too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, maybe we don't not really have the Ghoulies in it. Maybe if we have dwarf actors in it, that's fine, but they should have something interesting to do. You know what I mean? Maybe if we...
maybe be human characters.
Yeah, like maybe they're not just like the weird little condom helmets and like it's just there's so many like it's good like you said, I like Ghoulies 2 quite a lot because I loved it as a kid. So because I saw Ghoulies 2 before I saw the first one. So
Yeah.
and even as a kid when I went and saw the first one, I remember being like, oh, this isn't as good.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
first movie, seeing it like I mentioned, maybe in my early teens in the early '90s, kind of put me off actually from seeing Ghoulies 2 for a
can
little
see
while,
why.
and then
see
I
that,
went to it and I said, no, you know what, let me check it out, and then I was a bit pleasantly surprised in some ways. One thing that I will say is, which gives it an automatic extra star rating if we were using that system, is that I laughed so hard at Cat Ghoulie with the gun in the little firing game.
amazing.
Just such
It's
a great
great.
visual.
I
Plus
think
you
he's
get
shooting at
more
Rat
fish
Ghoulie,
Ghoulie.
right? Isn't Rat
He
Ghoulie
is,
like
yep.
running around behind the targets? And
Yeah.
Cat Ghoulies,
I love
and I love
that.
There's a bit where when Cat Ghoulies trying to peg him, and Cat Ghoulie actually gets frustrated that he keeps missing. And I'm like, I love
Yeah.
that that's the stuff but that's why you watch these movies, right? You want to see John Beekler monsters with as much personality imbued in them as possible, getting into these crazy things. That's what we're there for. So when you're promised that by a poster of a ghoulie coming out of a toilet with a weird little outfit on, like, correct me if I'm wrong, does the fish ghoulie ever wear the suspenders and shit in the first movie?
No,
Right.
He's
No,
always
never
topless.
Why is he wearing
No,
clothes
no.
on the poster?
Because he's one of the Dexy's Midnight Runners.
Well, like, he's dressed in, like, I was like, he looks like he should be in, like, a sailor, like one of those sailors in, like, a gay leather bar. Like, it's
Right, yeah.
It's a very weird little outfit he has.
he's Al Pacino looking for a serial
Yeah,
killer.
there's some crazy vibes to that ghoulie. Yeah.
Oh,
I
not
mean,
to
none of them
R.I.P.
wear
William Friedkin.
clothes.
Not to date this episode too
Yeah.
much.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
One thing I like about the end of
Well-
this movie, though, too, is that we get big, like the big fish ghoulie, also,
Yeah.
which has a real humanoids from the deep vibe, but luckily
Yep.
with less fish.
I
rape.
mean, he's undeniably cool. The big ghoulie. It's a cool
And
costume. It's fun.
we get to see ghoulies die. We get to see that they are vulnerable in some
Isn't
way.
it kind of
which
a
we didn't
weird
get.
thing that he's cannibalizing like little ghoulies? Like, is that cannibalism for him? I would think it would
I wasn't
be.
clear on what his whole deal was because they summoned him to take care of the ghoulies, but then he just kept coming after
Yeah,
them. And
that's like
it's-
if you
is it-
hired an exterminator, but then the exterminator started fucking with your stuff and like bugging you in your house. You'd be like, what?
the implication I got was that he thought that Fondacaro was one of the ghoulies and that he was going after him, and that's kind of
Offensive, yeah.
ableist and offensive. But that seemed to be the vibe because they were trying to protect him, and then they get the great bit of putting a Molotov cocktail inside a monkey suit and
Yeah,
feeding it to him.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's.
yeah.
That's how I solve most of my problems, to be honest.
It's
but
a
yeah,
good fix
yeah.
for most things. I mean,
It is,
It's
it
one
is.
thing too. I think that says a lot about why this movie is a better movie than the first. And I think Ghoulies 2 is just kind of in the Charlie Band staple of little creature movies, one of the ones that works. And I think there's the scene where Ned gets killed, and the nephew comes in, and he's understandably upset, and he starts to kind of cry a bit, but it's actually a scene where I was like, oh, I just felt a ting of something for this character because you like Ned. He's a likable. Royal Dano's a likable actor. It's a likable character, and it's the first time the Ghoulies killed anyone in any of these movies that we gave a shit about. Because in the first one, I don't care. Fucking kill everyone. It wouldn't have mattered to me at all. In this one, you like Ned. So when one of the Ghoulies kills a character we like, all of a sudden the movie has some emotional stakes. And any movie that does that is succeeding on some level. So
yeah, the only
Exactly.
area where I think they kind of dropped the ball is that the annoying party teens, that
All
he
live.
gets saved from the guillotine, and
yeah, isn't that
and
that's a very weird thing to me because they should have died, really.
right.
Yeah.
I don't know
That
why.
feels like the PG-13 edit there,
I think so.
like they cut some of the
Yeah.
gory scenes out
'Cause
of that. But yeah,
no
I
one was
could've- I
going,
could've-
save them, save. Everyone's like, yeah, I want to see them get fucking killed, and then they don't. Yeah,
It's like, look, we've got Kirkland brand Billy Zabka here. Like we got to kill him. Like, come on, we got to do something with it.
I mean,
but
when Sasha Jensen's been killed by Michael Myers, I think I wanted him to be able to add also being killed by Ghoulies to his list, and now he can't. So he's
I know.
probably
It
I'm
would have been
sure
a
he's very
beautiful
disappointed
resume.
by that. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've sort of probably gotten to the end of what we really want to discuss with Ghoulies 1 and 2. I think we hit a lot of areas of these two movies. Are there any like overarching final thoughts of something we haven't hit on
I
yet?
think for me it's that thing of like when you look at, you have a good concept, which the Ghoulies was, and whether or not it was influenced by Gremlins, which I don't think it was. I don't think the first movie was really influenced by Gremlins at all because I think it would be better than it is if it had been.
yeah, it was more parallel thinking.
Yeah, I
think
think so. And Charlie was not like, oh, I'm going to spend the rest of my career making Gremlins ripoffs because he went on to continuously make little creature movies. I don't really think that's fair. And I think the first one, as we've discussed, I think it has that germ of what would go on to be a fun little creature movie that we get with the second one. It's not necessarily iconic, but it delivers on the promise of that poster. And it actually has a cool toilet scene in it, not some tacked on thing. So, when what's his name, Judge Reinhold Ripoff gets the ghoulie up his ass, and that's the guy who deserves to have that fate. So,
absolutely.
Yeah,
but
I'm
I
glad
think
we
it
get
also-
that payoff.
yeah, exactly. I mean, they actually worked it into the movie rather than being some tacked in, afterthought. But I think it has to do too with a movie that is put in the hands of someone very capable like Albert Band, who is a very good director, and it's a well-directed film. I mean, it's the creatures are shot well and properly. They're not overly lit. Usually these kind of puppet creatures do better with some stylized lighting. The first one has very little of that. They had the benefit too of a overqualified writer like Dennis Paoli to write a script that understood how to do a creature movie like this, and wasn't confused by like what they were trying to do. Like we talked a lot about that first one has all this cult stuff, and it's sort of, you're kind of mystified as to why this is the movie we're seeing. Like, why are we're here for a little creature movie and we're watching all this cult shit that doesn't even really work as that. So
I'm so happy that we don't encounter that in the second movie.
And I think that's why, like, when you go on IMDb or whatever and you look at these movies, there's a consensus there that I think most people preferred the second film, and for most people the second film was the highlight of a franchise that ostensibly is famous for a poster. And it's so it's, but that impact of that, I think I'm glad the second movie exists. The third one has some fun stuff in it too. The fourth one's fucking bizarre because there's no ghoulies in it, but like literally they're not in that one.
They couldn't afford the puppets for the fourth movie,
right.
So it's just two little people.
Now I want to know, like, when you're sitting in a meeting, we're going to do Ghoulies 4, and you realize that at that moment we don't have the money for the ghoulie puppets. Why you're thinking at that point and be like, let's not do it then? Like, why you'd proceed,
or at least turn it into a no name norm sequel.
If you don't have the money for those fucking puppets, you don't have the money to make a movie.
You don't. Those are not detailed puppets.
Not in the first one, certainly. I mean, you could see the guy's fucking hand inside it. Like, come on. I mean, by the second one, I think the puppets are much more sophisticated. I didn't watch the third one again because we weren't covering it here, but I don't remember them being shoddy in the third one either, but I could be misremembering. And I don't know what the budget was like on the third one.
Non-existent, if I know anything about that movie.
Yeah, because that one did go straight to video.
Yeah, what's the actress who stars in that one? Is it it's Teresa Randall or something like that. There's a fairly well-known actor.
So I don't remember.
Who plays kind of like the badass chick in that one, and I can't remember who it is now. In any case, I think it's the key there is that you get the only Empire sequel. It's Ghoulies 2. It's a fun movie. We've talked about the importance of that poster, but the importance of Ghoulies 2 is that it really is the precursor to Puppet Master and Charlie's obsession with doing more and more of these kinds of films. And it's the same DP. This guy, Sergio Savetti, who shot this, went on to shoot the first Puppet Master. So this was a training ground for what Charlie would go on to do. And I think most people would say his most successful little creature movie would be the Puppet Master stuff, especially the early Full Moon Puppet Master films, 1 through 5.
I would agree, and I think we're going to cover a lot of them. We're going to cover a lot of them. There's going to be a lot more of these. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a fascinating. These are a fascinating pair of movies just because of how outsizedly important they are for this whole franchise that we're covering, while not being like particularly great or important movies in and of themselves. In a vacuum, these are pretty forgettable little mini monster movies. With the second one obviously being far, far better, but they have such an outsized impact on this career that we're covering and on these films that are all kind of stemming from it. It makes it pretty interesting to me. It's always interesting to kind of analyze what cultural moment we were at this time that made these such a big hit and made these resonate.
If you're looking at Charles Band and Full Moon, in a macro sense, you can't not look at the Ghoulies films because
no, very important.
They're as much as there's all kinds of Empire movies that are far superior movies, that even something like Zone Troopers or even Trancers, like I
love Trancers.
Oh, Trancers is to me is iconic. I mean, I adore that movie. It's a far superior movie to Ghoulies, but I don't think even Trancers had the impact on Charles Band's career that Ghoulies did.
No,
and it's as we said, it's a far superior movie. So, it's an interesting thing. There's very few filmmakers that you look at their career and see a movie that didn't really work, that wasn't like a passion project of that filmmaker or that producer in this case, that had such an impact on the rest of their career. So it is kind of a weird thing to look at, and in that context, and contextualize for Charlie Band what Ghoulies was.
It was,
and
Steve said before, a $35 million toilet poster.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us and lending your insight, onto both of these movies, and, your knowledge of Charles Band and Empire and Full Moon. It didn't go unnoticed here, and we were just really, happy to have you on to
Well,
be
thank
able
you.
to discuss
Absolutely.
these two movies together, because I know there is a Blu-ray or a 4K
Yeah.
of the first movie, and then another Blu-ray of the second movie. I don't know if that's a 4K too, but those are
I
coming
think
out
it's just a Blu-ray, yeah.
any day now. When this episode drops, they will be available very, very
It's
shortly
a good time
thereafter.
to revisit Ghoulies.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So-
yeah, no, it was
Whether
really
or not
great,
Ghoulies
talking
looks
to you.
better in 4K, I don't know.
I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say maybe it looks worse, but
Yeah.
no. But it was great getting to pick your brain about this.
Yeah.
So thank you so
Oh
much.
no,
for
yeah,
bringing your,
I'm happy.
bringing
I
your
mean, I
expertise here.
hope at some point, we can get into one of the Puppet Master movies. That's where I.
Oh, yeah.
can really.
We've got
We'd be happy to have
plenty
you back,
left.
for sure.
Yeah.
And Kevin, if
yeah.
you want to take a minute here for any of our listeners who may not be familiar with the Spill Your Guts podcast, if you want to take a minute just to kind of plug, what it is that you do, and some episodes that are available for people to listen to.
Yeah, sure. The show that I created and host is called Kevin Lane's Spill Your Guts. It's a in-depth kind of career-spanning conversation with creatives in genre film and television, and kind of all elements of genre creation. The focus is generally film and television, but we have writers and novelists and people like Richard Chismar who have done the show, and we've had a fair amount of Full Moon content on our show. We did a huge subspecies week, which was a full week of diving into the subspecies series with Ted Nicolau and Me Stuff and Honest Hove and Kevin Spiritus and all those guys, where we dropped an episode every day for a week with one of them, and then culminated with a big group one in anticipation of Blood Rise. So, and we've had Charlie on, and coming up, we're on hiatus right now. We go back and we pick up for season 3, beginning of September, and in season 3 we've got like Richard Band. We did a great episode of Richard where we actually got the ability to use a lot of Richard's music throughout the episode.
Oh, great.
Which is
Awesome.
fun. Yeah. And we're doing a big thing on Primevals, which is, of course, like, there's a lot about that to unpack.
We're
Yeah,
very
I
hyped
can't wait
about
to check
one.
that out.
I just got back from seeing it in Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal with Charlie and Chris Endicott. It was amazing. It's such a unique and interesting story in film.
Yeah.
So we've got some stuff about that, and
Awesome.
yeah. So you guys are all Full Moon all the time, but I kind of veer in and out because I the fact is for me, and I've talked to Charlie about this, and I've talked about it on my show a fair bit, is that my career as a filmmaker is owed a great debt to Charlie Band's Video Zone segments at a young age, showing me how shit was done and going, oh, that's how it is. Like, because it's impossible to understate or overstate, I guess is the expression, how important those video zones were, because there were no DVDs or Blu-rays, there were no special features, there was no internet. To see how, to get a little window with the people who made those great video store classics was something that only Charlie was doing. So,
Yeah.
Full Moon and Empire and Charlie Band have a huge influence on my career and my taste as a film lover.
Yeah, and I feel like the more we've dug into movies and things, there's things we're picking up on the video zones that we're loving. So, Steve, tell us, what VHS classic are we hitting next week?
Oh boy. Well, today we talked about the movie that was so successful that it forged the way for the entire Empire and Full Moon catalog. Next week, we are going to be talking about the single most successful film in both of those studios' histories. And it may not be what you think, because we are talking about Moonbeam Entertainment's pre-Hysteria. Yes, we are going back to... I think this is going to be our first Moonbeam.
This is
the
our
time
first
I
talking
didn't know you
Moonbeam.
guys were going to do the Moonbeam stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah. We're doing Moonbeam, we're doing Torchlight, we're doing Monster Island, we're doing all of those.
Oh, wow.
This will be our
Zarkor,
first...
yeah.
Moonbeam, which is the family-friendly label that Charlie started putting out in the early 90s. And this one is, he still claims to this day, the most successful film they've ever made.
Not surprising, because the biggest piece of... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said to us when we told them about the show, are you doing Moonbeam stuff too? Can you do an episode on prehysteria? So listeners, if you are any of those people commenting that this is something that you are clamoring for, you are in luck, because we will be hitting Moonbeam and prehysteria next week. If you like the show and you like what you've heard, then jump onto Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Drop us a 5-star rating and maybe a review if you're feeling so inclined. You can follow us on Instagram at puppetmasters_Castle Freaks. We are also on Threads. We are on Twitter or X, at least for a little while. You can follow me on my personal account _cowboy_Jerry, or Steve's personal account at Minotaur Matador. And if you like the show, keep spreading the word. We've been getting some amazing feedback and hearing some great stories of people spreading the word around conventions and things like that. So really happy to hear that. And if you want to contact us to give us feedback on the show or correct any mistakes that we made or add extra anecdotes, you can email us at puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. So we will see all of you guys next week for Prehysteria. Stay tuned.